Hello, friends, and welcome to episode number 66 of Nostalgia Talk. Holy crap, 66. We're almost at the big 7-0. That's coming
Wow.
up. Yeah, I'm James, and welcome to episode number 66. Joining me this time around is voice actor Michael Gough. Welcome. Did I say your name right, by the way?
I was just going to compliment you on saying it correctly because we didn't discuss it ahead of time, right? And most people get it wrong the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But you're in Nova Scotia,
Yep.
right? Yeah. I don't know. There's probably a fair amount of Goths in Nova Scotia. It's an Irish name, but it's
If
anyway.
it's an Irish name, then there's probably more Goffs in Newfoundland then.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But well, thanks for getting it right the first time.
You're welcome. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, as I said, Michael is a voice actor. He has done Deckard Cain in the Diablo video game series, Gopher in Winnie the Pooh. He's done Goof Troop, TaleSpin, and Darkwing Duck. He was Frankie the dog in the JumpStart educational computer games, which I played as a kid, and also is the substitute voice for Shrek for video games and other projects.
All true.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did my research.
Now here, I'll just throw in a couple more because I don't know why, it's just self-promotion.
No, go ahead, of course.
Came from doing a convention like a week and a half ago. And it was literally the first thing I've done since before the pandemic. First time I traveled in over 3 years, and some of, everybody, and it was great, and people were really nice. And a couple of the more popular things I guess that I've done, which you haven't mentioned, in addition to what you said, the Gears of War video game franchise, Resident Evil 4, Spyro the Dragon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are all things that people would come up and talk about. Batman, the video games, Arkham Origins being the most prominent one for me, I guess. Anyway, so those are a few other things.
Okay, cool. So no, I'm being serious. That's very cool. You listed off the ones that I didn't mention in the intro, but some of them I actually did get into the Q&A. So some of those will get brought up eventually.
Cool.
All right. So to begin, how did you get interested in voice acting?
Well, I even just regular acting wasn't really on my radar. I was in college, and I wasn't even really sure what I was going to do. I was an English major because I didn't really know what else to do. Music was another possible major for me, and even after I finished and got my English degree, I thought, well, maybe I'll stick around and try to get a music degree. And I originally went to college on this very, very small little athletic scholarship, actually. I was a shot putter and discus thrower on the track team in college. It was fun. Throwing stuff is fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, no, it is. And being in Nova Scotia, I'm sure you probably have a lot of like Highland games and Scottish, tossing the caber and all that stuff. I would imagine it's probably nothing that's that interesting, but yeah, I got into that pretty seriously, and then did that in college. And basically, when I was just about to finish college, get my English degree, and not sure what I'm going to do, I had always, I think from when I was a kid, I enjoyed reading out loud. That was something that was fun. And I think even when I was a kid, I kind of played around with my voice, and, but even the whole acting thing was nothing that I really thought of. But right before I was done with college, I saw these signs around the campus This is at UC Santa Barbara.
I was just about to ask you what college you went to.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's, you know, part of the UC system in California, which includes UCLA, Berkeley, UC Davis up north, UC Riverside down south. It's a whole, you know, and UC Santa Barbara is great. I mean, Santa Barbara is not the worst place to spend some time because it is beautiful there. And so I just had seen these signs hanging around the campus that said audition for original one-act plays. Basically, it was the playwriting class, and they had like kind of a, you know, they chose some of the student plays and they were going to produce them and put them on. So basically, it was like one performance. I just thought it would be fun to try to do something like that before I left college and went off and did God knows what. So it was basically on a whim. I went to this audition on the campus, and it was like a whole bunch of people, and the authors of these plays were all milling around, and they would, you know, a couple of people came up to me and handed me something, you know, can you read this scene? And I did, and this one girl who came up to me and handed me like a couple pages from her play, and I read it, and she said, don't talk to anybody else. I want you to be in my play. So just, you can go now. I said, okay. I'm still really good friends with her, by the way. She went on to later win an Emmy for writing. It was like an after-school special something, but she's written a whole bunch of things. And she's sort of, in a roundabout way, helped with the whole Shrek thing coming about. That's, I'm getting off track. So I did this one play, and it was really good, actually, you know, for this little production. And that kind of something just kind of bit me or clicked, you know, and I thought, I don't know if this could be an actual thing, but let me look into it. So I ended up sticking around, stayed in school for like 2 more years and got a theater degree and started, you know, I took the acting classes in college, and I did a bunch of plays and theater in college. And then I thought, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. So, and then I thought, okay, the next logical step was move to Los Angeles. Back then, basically, you would go to LA or New York if you wanted to try an actor. And I didn't want to go to New York yet. So I just kept migrating south, went to LA. But the summer before I moved to LA, there was a movie that was shot in and around Santa Barbara. And I had heard about it, and they had auditions, and I went and auditioned for this movie, and I got cast as the lead part in this movie. You know, and even then the director was saying, you know, this is going to launch your career. And I thought, all right, well, I got it made. It was great to do it. It was a blast, and it was really, you know, a lot of fun. And then it never went anywhere. Now, I just discovered, like a couple of days ago, I was just noodling around. This movie is available to see online. I'm going to plug it because it's basically in the style, the humor style of like Airplane, if you know what I'm talking about, or if anybody knows. Very broad, ridiculous humor, but it's supposed to kind of spoof the whole world of the mafia and gangsters and that kind of thing. And it's gone through several titles, which is why I couldn't find it, because originally it was supposed to be called Harold Harold is a fool. Then I looked around, I finally looked up the director's name and something else he had done, and it led to this thing. And I think it's called Let's All Kill Harold. I'll make sure. But if you look that up, there's a little website for it that has a trailer. Or maybe it's Let's All Kill Harold or Everybody Wants to Kill Harold. One of those two. But
either way, the title has something to do with killing Harold.
Yeah. Harold is this young guy, me, who inherits this whole, like, mob family empire, but he doesn't know anything about it, and he's an innocent librarian. And
yeah, they made you an offer that you can't refuse.
That's right. I couldn't turn it down. And but it was great. It was my first experience really with, shooting something on camera. And since I was like the main character, I was in almost, not all, but most of the scenes in the movie. And it was shot on location everywhere in some really fancy houses and, like inside a little church. And there's some pretty funny, it's very silly, and it's, you can tell that the budget was pretty low. And, there were some good actors in it. And then there were other people in it who weren't really actors. But it's all in all, it's actually kind of like nothing you've ever seen before. And and it starts off, even when I started watching it, just, is this really it? I go, yeah, it is. Even in the beginning, the camera is a little shaky here and there, but so I'm telling anybody that wants to listen to, if they feel like it, it might be worth, getting a little, drunk or something and watching it. It's pretty funny and silly. And so it's either Everybody Wants to Kill Harold or Let's All Kill Harold. Maybe I'll look it up before we're done. Anyway, I have a tendency to kind of go on and go off on tangents. So that was what I did right before I moved to LA. The whole voiceover thing just came about because I didn't really know anything about it. But again, I always kind of enjoyed reading out loud, and I had been doing a lot of theater, and somebody had suggested a voiceover class as being something that was a good idea. And I just thought, oh, okay, yeah. And I did. I took this class. The woman who taught the class was very helpful to me, and sort of helped me point me in the direction of getting an agent, which took a little while in doing, but timing is everything. And this agent had just broken away from a big agency to form her own agency. And I'm still with her all these years later. So one thing kind of led to another, and then I would start getting, voice auditions. And I had done a few on-camera things here and there, and theater, which doesn't really pay much. So I wasn't really making a living as an actor, but the voice stuff started, that's the path that kind of opened up the widest. And I actually started getting some jobs and more work and making a living. So I kind of, okay, I'm gonna stick to that path. I was still doing a lot of theater for a while. It's been, haven't done any since before, at least a few years before the pandemic. It takes a lot of time, do a play takes up chunks of, months, but yeah, that's sort of how the whole voiceover thing started. It wasn't really a plan. It just sort of came to be.
Sometimes the best things in life, they just happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way, even when I was in college or even as a kid or high school or whatever, I never would have thought that I would be, quote, an actor, or much less a voice actor, whatever that is. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm grateful. I'm happy that, you know, it's not like, you know, it's like anything that you do in showbiz or as an actor, you know, you're always, unless you're in that upper circle of people who really never audition, they just work all the time,
Yeah.
which is great. I'm not there, you know, I work sometimes, and I've been able to make a living for a number of years, but I still have to audition all the time, and that's like 90% of the job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I've come across that in my own career. I work in film. I've done I did voiceover for a show once, and you know,
Yeah,
a lot of the job is putting your name out there to get noticed and recognized.
yeah, yeah. And the one thing about, you know, everything, the pandemic, everything changed basically. At least here in LA, in and around LA, you would go places to audition most of the time, either to your agent's office, and they would have their own recording setup, booth, whatever, or there were a handful of places around town where you would go and, you know, they were voice over casting places. Let me see. There's one place, and it might have maybe the most prominent. I think it's still there, but it's not really in business anymore. It was called the Voice Caster. And I'm going to look here for a second. I think I have this sitting here. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So the Voice Caster, when I first started, you know, for like the first year, basically, you had to have a demo tape. And it was literally a tape, a reel-to-reel tape, not even a cassette. That came like a couple of years later. And if you go, the Voice Caster has in their lobby, they have one wall that is covered with everybody's demo tape box. Not everybody, but, you know, people who were, you know, I guess, prominent enough to have their box up on the wall. So my box is on the wall, my original demo tape box, which I was happened to be sitting here because I think somebody wanted to see it and I took a picture of it. Basically, and I put this together just myself with like scissors and pasting and took it to a printer. And it's kind of beat up, but it's basically like kind of a spoof of a horror movie poster. So I don't know if you can see that.
Well, none of the listeners can, because this is not a video show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Can you see it? You can see it.
Yep.
Or can you? Yeah. Yeah. So this is an actual like monster from a real movie. And in this picture, it's holding a severed head. So I took that out, put my own head on it. And so it's called The Voice from Another World. Anyway, so again, I tend to ramble, but yeah, having to do all of the audition stuff now by yourself, including all the editing and all the technical stuff, which, you know, thankfully there were people that did that and you could concentrate on just doing the thing itself. Now, you know, I mean, I'm okay at it and I've worked on some, you know, audio stuff with music, but it just takes me forever I end up doing too many takes because now I'm just hearing myself all the time. Frankly, I get sick of my own voice after a while.
I can understand that.
If you're locked in this, you know, in the way I have it set up, it's a room, the computer's in the room, but the mic is in a closet. So if you're in there for hours on end, whatever, I start getting claustrophobic and I'm sick of myself and I do too many takes and then it takes way too much editing and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so that's just, you know, basically you kind of have to do all the auditioning on your own.
So what was
now.
your first ever
voiceover gig or role?
Well, I'll break it down into two things. The
Okay.
first thing that I kind of remember, first like actual gig, I had actually done because some people that I knew who had come to LA had this little weekend local radio show. And it was a call-in show, ask questions, technical talk, a home computer, whatever. Like people could call in to ask questions if they had, problems, or they could just call in to chat about whatever the latest thing was. So they knew that I was, and this was like right after college, before I got into doing the voiceover thing, but they had asked me if I wanted to do some little commercials for them, some little radio commercials. So I said, oh yeah, okay. One of them was like a spoof of the dating game. So I played like 3 different guys who were like contestants on a dating game. And I had those little commercials on tape, which actually kind of helped me get an agent eventually. But so my first real job that I remember after I had gotten an agent was something for it was some little show for Showtime. This is when Showtime was like a new thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't even remember, I think it was some little show about cool things that you could buy for not a lot of money. I think that was the gist of the show. And so there was a woman who was the director, and this was like a narration, but it had to match the video, which was all new to me. But I had a pretty good eye and an ear for things, so I think, okay, we can do this. And so the way it went was they rolled the video, and I had the script in front of me, and this woman was standing right behind me. I could feel her like breathing on my neck. And so every time it came time for me to say something, she would like tap my shoulder, but I didn't know when it was coming exactly. So I'm like saying, oh, okay.
You're just waiting for your cue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it made me really nervous because rather than just using whatever visual cues there might be, I'm waiting for this mystery tap to come every time. And I thought, is that how this works? Wow, that's weird. It's not. Nobody's ever done anything like that since then. But, it was a job, and we got through it. It was kind of interesting and fun. So that was my first actual job. My first, what I would call big job, was the Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, nice.
And I distinctly remember the auditions for Winnie the Pooh. They were at that place I was talking about, the voice caster, and they were, you had to match and try to sound like the original Winnie the Pooh voices from the original Winnie the Pooh short films, one of which won an Academy Award for short animated film. And some of the original cast, this is when Disney was doing the cartoon series, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
Yes, I love that show.
Yeah.
Hey, Gopher.
How is it going?
It's going well. It's nice to hear from you. It's been a little while.
Yeah. Mouth's dry. Yes, it's been a while. So, and I kind of remember as a kid seeing those Winnie the Pooh shorts and kind of trying to mimic that whistling Gopher voice. And, some of the original cast returned to do the cartoon series. And the guy who did the Gopher originally, he was still around, but for whatever reason, he just didn't want to do the series. So I auditioned, and then lo and behold, they chose me for that. And I was very like, oh, wow, really? Something Disney, Winnie the Pooh? That was my first kind of big break, really. And that was, yeah, it was great. You would mostly get to go and work with the other people in the show. A couple of them, Piglet, for example, he was in New York. So he was never there here in LA. And I never got to meet him, but that's the way he sounds in real life.
John Fielder?
John Fiedler. He's
okay.
that's the way he sounds.
Mess that up, yeah.
Yeah, you look at it, it looks like Fielder, but it's actually the D comes first, so it's Fiedler.
Okay.
But yes, that's the way he talks normally. And
yeah, I saw him
in a movie, Raisin in the Sun. We watched it in my high school English class because we were reading the book as part of our curriculum. He comes in, and I recognized his voice as Piglet, and I looked at one of my friends. I was like, "That's the voice of Piglet." And my friend's like, "How the hell did you know that?"
It's kind of hard to miss it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great episode of Star Trek, the original series, with John Fiedler.
I saw that. Yeah.
The episode's called Wolf in the Fold. I'm kind of, when it comes to Star Trek, I know the original series like the back of my hand. The rest of it, I'm not great on. Okay, there you go.
I know that none of the listeners can see it, but I'm doing the Star Trek hand sign as kind of a way to give the thumbs up or a good on you. It looks kind of like my traditional sign off with Nostalgia Talk when I say peace, but I'm not finished yet. So
well, that is of course the Vulcan live long and prosper.
Right.
John Fiedler, Piglet, he's in this. It's a great episode where he's this like entity. Well, he's embodying this body, but he is this entity who has lived through centuries committing mass murders. He was Jack the Ripper, he was other things, and now he's inhabiting the body of John Fiedler. So Paul Winchell, who was
I was just about to ask you if you got to know Paul Winchell, because he's one of my heroes.
Well, yeah, he was amazing. He was another guy who never was in the group when we recorded. But when there was singing involved, there were a few episodes where there were songs and singing as part of the episode. Then I did get to meet and work with him. I got to do one singing session with just me and him, basically. I think Owl maybe also. So I did meet him a couple of times. I didn't really get to know him at all, but he was a pretty incredible guy because, he did tons of cartoons and voiceover stuff. Even before that, he was famous. He had his own TV show. He was a ventriloquist.
Yeah, he had a couple of
TV shows.
Yeah. And then there's this like really terrible story about, I think Universal owned the rights to them and they got into a dispute. They ended up destroying most of the, the original tapes of all of his shows.
Oh, damn.
But he was also like this brilliant guy who he invented one of the early versions of the artificial heart.
Yeah.
One of my past guests told me that.
Yeah. It was
amazing. And like I tell people that, and they actually don't believe me that a puppeteer and voice actor invented the artificial heart. They're like, yeah, that's bogus, and I'm like, no, it's true because the arts can save lives.
Yeah, and he was also, as far as I remember, he was invited to be part of some like worldwide exclusive think tank, which was working on like big world problems like world hunger and all kinds of things. So he was he was an amazing guy. So that again is my long-winded answer to your question about what were my first. The Winnie the Pooh was my first kind of big break, really.
Well, actually, that was going to be my next question about the Gopher, how you got that part, but looks like we covered that. But I would like to keep talking about Disney because you were on some of the most iconic Disney cartoon shows of the 90s. You've done episodes of Goof Troop, TaleSpin, and Darkwing Duck. What was that like?
It was great.
Okay.
Yeah, there was that whole stretch there where it was the Disney afternoon, and that's what they called it here, but all of those really cool Disney cartoons. There's couple of interesting little side notes about a couple of these things. So TaleSpin, the character of Colonel Spigot, was originally somebody else was doing Colonel Spigot, and they had already finished like a few episodes. But for whatever reason, they just weren't crazy about the way that it sounded. And I don't know why, really. I'm not sure. But they ended up recasting Colonel Spigot. And I was at the time working on Winnie the Pooh, and got an audition with the director of who was doing TaleSpin, for Colonel Spigot, and ended up getting chosen. And it was I guess what I was doing was a very different thing. He became more, less threatening and more, just more silly, basically, even though he's still a villain. He's got this complex about being too small and everything, which is kind of funny. But what was interesting was, so there were like, I don't know, maybe 3 episodes that were already finished. So I had to go back and dub the lines in to match the picture that was already done. So that was maybe one of my first experiences of doing that kind of thing. Then after that, because usually whatever you record, you do the voice first, then all the animation or whatever comes later. So that was, it's great. It's fun. It was a fun character. And Goof Troop, there was a character. Now, so the character, this character takes on a few different identities in different episodes.
Right.
The basic name of the character is Fester Swollen. Yeah. And so how that came about was, there was a guy that I knew from college. He was in like the local music scene. He was in a band, kind of a punk band, or in Santa Barbara, called the Spoilers. Okay, are you a punk fan?
I am a big punk fan. Like, I love Simple Plan, All Time Low, Paramore, Weezer, Blink-182. Like, I grew up in the 2000s, so that's my era right there.
Cool. As another quick side note, a few years back, I was invited to BlizzCon to do something, something Deckard Cain related. And Blizzard has its own convention, and it's pretty huge. And the music, they have musical guests every year. So that particular year, the musical guest was Blink-182.
Nice.
Yeah. So this guy was in this band in Santa Barbara called the Spoilers. And I knew him through, so one of the girls who was in the acting program with me, her boyfriend was also in the Spoilers. So I would sometimes hang out with them. So I just sort of knew them a little bit. And they were part of that kind of punk scene in Santa Barbara. And there was another band that was even bigger. They were sort of well known, called the Rotters. The lead singer of the Rotters was, his name in the band was Fester Swollen. So this guy who was in the Spoilers, all of a sudden, lo and behold, years later, I didn't even know this until, you know, he was working for Disney as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was writing some of the scripts for like Goof Troop and other. So he basically, it was almost kind of an in joke between us. He sort of created this character and named it Fester Swollen, stole the name from the lead singer of the Rotters, the punk band from Santa Barbara. And wasn't, he said, I didn't even think that Disney would let that name slide because it's sort of, you know, kind of a disgusting name, but they did. So that was kind of funny. Yeah, and the other, and Darkwing Duck, the character of Jumbalaya Jake, who's, you know, he's a little Cajun guy who lives down in the sewer with his pet alligator, and he's got the whole Cajun accent thing going, you know, which is a lot of fun. It was, ooh, I guarantee you and me gonna do a little wrestling stuff. You know, it's all, when you get to do stuff like that, it's really fun. And especially, you know, Disney related. I have a couple other little Disney facts, which I can spring on you.
Go ahead.
If you care. Well, it just at Disneyland, and I guess wherever there's a Winnie the Pooh ride, you can hear my voice in the ride, which is pretty exciting for me.
I've been to Disneyland, but I don't remember seeing anything Winnie the Pooh related. Actually, no, that's not correct. I did do a Winnie the Pooh ride at Disneyland. I'll have to listen for your voice next time I go.
Well, it's the Gopher in the ride.
Of course, yeah.
Pretty short. It's towards the beginning of the ride. I think he pops up out of his hole, says something. But another interesting fact. So me and my younger cousin, we were the first two people to ever ride Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, nice.
And the reason for that is our grandfather, my mom's dad, after World War II, he and three other guys formed this little company. And you can look, there's like stuff about them online, and there's a documentary. The company was called Arrow Development, like bow and arrow. And they basically, and this is up in the Bay Area where I'm from originally, you know, San Jose, south of San Francisco-ish. And
go San Jose Sharks.
Man, I just, you know, they made it to the finals once. And I was really like, oh, maybe please one time. I was hoping that Joe Thornton could get a cup, you know.
Yeah, but I think that was the year they were beat by the Pittsburgh Penguins, whose team captain is a fellow Nova Scotian. So
yeah. Well, so this company that my grandfather and these three other guys started, they built like little local carnival rides and kiddie rides for little, like small little amusement, like, you know, parking lot amusement, street corner, whatever. And somehow Walt Disney got wind of this, and I guess he saw some of the things that they had built, and including one thing that they made was like a really small miniature scale, like riverboat, you know, which I think was one of the things that caught his eye. So I guess one thing led to another. He ended up hiring Arrow Development to build most of the original rides at Disneyland. And I'm talking about the ride,
right?
Not like, you know, all the stuff that goes, but the actual ride, the track, the thing you sit in, and all of that. And they built the carousel, the spinning teacups, you know, a bunch of the original Disney rides, the Matterhorn, Mr. Toad, Alice in Wonderland, the Casey Jr. train, what else? The Autopia, the little cars. And one of the last rides that they built for Disney, the last two really were The Haunted House and Pirates of the Caribbean. So one day, me and my younger cousin, we got to miss like a half a day of school, because they asked, hey, do you guys want to come and you'd be the first ones to be the guinea pigs to test this thing out. And it was the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. So we were literally the first ones to get in it and go on the track and test it out, see how it worked. So that's my other little Disney fun fact.
That's fun. That's fun. I have a very strong feeling that my friend Emily is just loving hearing that. She's a big Pirates of the Caribbean fan.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, see, what am I plugging? So I'm plugging the movie Everyone Wants to Kill Harold, or Let's All Kill Harold, or something like that. Look up Arrow Development, ARROW. And you can, because it's a pretty interesting little history part of Disney that not really many people know about.
Right.
So, yeah.
So moving on a little bit from Disney, you've been doing the voice of Deckard Cain for the Diablo video game series, basically since it started. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Interestingly, earlier you mentioned, what was it, JumpStart?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I grew up with the JumpStart computer games as a kid.
Yeah. So I think I had been, working on some of that stuff. And this was, I believe I was doing something that was JumpStart related, or there were a couple of like educational, software companies that were working under the same umbrella. There was JumpStart, and I think there was another name, but it was so it was probably something JumpStart related. And one day when we were done doing whatever we were doing, they said, hey, we have this idea for this character for something else. And maybe you could just lay down a few lines as we'll do a little quick audition here. I said, yeah, sure. I didn't know what it was, didn't know what it was for, but apparently like at the time, Blizzard was like a new thing. And it was under this same big umbrella of different companies. So they were connected. So, and it was like this kind of character of like an old, sage wizard kind of guy. And I think their suggestion was maybe he sounds like kind of an older Sean Connery or something like that. So it just sort of came out that way to begin with the first time that I read and did this audition. And then even, I think later when I actually did record some lines for this character, they said, yeah, we're going to try some more. We're going to do some stuff with that character that you read, before. And again, I didn't even know what this was for, really. And then all of a sudden, Diablo 1 sort of materialized. And I was, oh, okay. And, Deckard Cain basically was, I'll help you find your stuff. Here's your, look for the soul stone under the anvil. And then it became, then Diablo 2 came along. And then, Deckard Cain was, definitely a real, thing, a real character. I mean, I was just kind of oblivious because in the beginning, I just didn't even know what this was going to be, or if it was, or what it was. But then, I caught on eventually, and then Diablo 2 and then 3, and he definitely evolved. There were stories around Deckard Cain and his, his like relationship with Leah and his whole story. And there were other things, like the Book of Cain. And during the pandemic, actually, I did it was an audiobook, Diablo, I'm blanking on the titles. Diablo something. And it's basically kind of the story of Deckard Cain. It's got tons of other characters in it, but I was like the narrator voice, which was kind of straight, but a lot of it was Deckard Cain, either kind of younger or older. So that was pretty interesting. I haven't done many audiobook things. It's hard. I tip my hat to people. There are people that do a lot of it, but I'm not that, I can only do it for like a couple hours at a time, maybe. And I get fried and my voice starts going loopy. And, but yeah, it's called Diablo. Is it Immortal or the something? I forget. But so, yeah, Deckard Cain, of course, became like a kind of an iconic thing. And we don't, he's sort of like, he's kind of floating around in the ether right now because technically they, but I think, he may show up here and there in various ways. I don't know for sure.
I'm also glad that you brought up JumpStart, because like as I was saying to you when I invited you to do this show, I grew up with the JumpStart computer games. My uncle's daughter remembers that my mom, when I was a kid, only allowed me to play with like educational toys and stuff like that for a very good reason. I mean, there's not a lot of educational stuff out there these days. I mean, sure, we've got Sesame Street still going strong and a lot of educational TV shows. But of course, I was just talking to somebody about this today. On the internet, there's not really a lot of educational stuff. So with the JumpStart games, like what I really liked about them is the way that they were educational was that it was a way to show how to include people in your own activities by having the characters include the player in their own activities, for one thing. As I was researching for this, did you do JumpStart Artist?
It's quite possible. I really
because that's the one I really loved when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I remember Frankie, your character, Frankie the dog. His they all had these little activities. His was Frankie's paint along songs, where he would have the person playing like make some kind of a drawing for movies that would be included in the game.
Yeah. Well, one thing that was really neat about this stuff, and it was really good experience, was we got to do a bunch of different characters, because I think, as I recall, each specific thing, a lot of times it was a different kind of a character. But I kind of don't remember exactly what was what, so I can't. I could very well have done the artist thing, but there were lots of reading and numbers and art and history. Another thing that just popped in my head that was similar and maybe connected was leap pad.
I remember that.
Was that something? Yeah, that was sort of all. They all kind of branched off of each other. The JumpStart, the Leapfrog, and one company was connected to another, and but it was a lot of. It was really fun, and I think I was lucky to get to do some of that stuff, because it was good. It was good experience. It was fun. It was, it was for, something worthwhile, quote unquote. So yeah. And that's what led to Blizzard and everything. But yeah. So I guess it worked. You learned things from JumpStart.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And one of my friends and I were talking about this, but you look at the stuff that you watch that is educational, such as I mentioned Sesame Street, of course, and also JumpStart, and a show that I watched as a kid but haven't watched in a long time, but a lot of us probably watched it when we were kids, was Dora the Explorer. We don't really think as a kid what we're learning from it until we're a lot older. That's kind of the thing that I've noticed, because like I've interviewed writers from Sesame Street, and one of the writers, Norman Stiles, was saying that for some skits that he wrote, he often said, "We could never do the skit if there was no curriculum."
Well, yeah, you know, I think it's interesting that if it's kind of engaging and fun, which JumpStart I think was, you don't
Absolutely.
even you're just going along. It's like you're playing a game. You don't really even realize you're learning,
Yep.
but you're absorbing things. But in a way, you're kind of. It's not like you're being made to sit there and learn a lesson.
Yeah.
Because it's play. It's playful and it's fun, and it's almost like you don't even realize you're learning. If you're being entertained and you're playing along.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. I don't think anybody else really has brought up the JumpStart stuff much before. So that's cool.
Well, you've got a JumpStart kid here. I used to love that stuff when I was little.
Now, let me ask you this. I'm just curious. There was another, sort of not necessarily educational, but it was fun and it sort of involved helping you like do problem solving things. Tonka Joe. Does that ring a bell?
I remember Tonka trucks, but Tonka Joe.
Well, it was the same Tonka company. Tonka Joe was, and these were like early, like, you know, educational CD-ROM game stuff where, you know, Tonka Joe was your host and guide, and he would help you, you know, solve things that needed to be solved. If there was like a construction site that needed like 10 dump trucks full of concrete, well, here, we're going to have to go here. And it was, that was a little bit later. That came a little later than like the JumpStart stuff. But it was, in my mind.
Was Tonka Joe your voice?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
I was Tonka Joe. And there were like a bunch of, you know, games and things where you would play, but it wasn't just for playing. It was also to kind of solve a problem or, you know, learn how to do something, but fun. So,
Right.
but that's great. It's very cool to hear that, you know, JumpStart molded your impressionable young mind in a good way.
As I said, my friend remembers that I was only allowed educational toys and games, and again, for a good reason, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Probably a good idea that you weren't like playing, I don't know, Call of Duty or something when you were.
So weird.
I've never been a Call of Duty person. And I have nothing against it. I don't really play violent video games.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I've worked on some stuff that's, you know, it's pretty violent. I'm kind of, I think it's, you know, as long as you're, you know, of a certain age and you're responsible, then it's fine, but it's not for everybody. And no, it's, yeah, if it's not your thing, that's great.
So you were talking about doing multiple voices for JumpStart and Leapfrog, which gets me into my next question. You were on the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, where you got to voice multiple characters within that show. What was that like?
It was a blast. That anytime you get to do stuff like that. There was another show that just came to mind where I also got to do a bunch of like different things, which I don't know if it would ring a bell. The new Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat.
Nice.
Is that yeah, it was like I think I did a few more of those than the Billy and Mandy, but yeah, no, Billy and Mandy was it was funny. It was weird. It's a weird show. It's you know, funny, weird, and I remember one of the roles was the chupacabra that like sucks Billy out into the TV or something. I can't even remember, but he does. At first, the chupacabra just makes weird noises. It doesn't come, but then it like materializes and it actually kind of talks a little bit at the end of that episode, I think. He's like, I love you, Benny. And, if for me, there are some people, voice actor types, who they kind of basically do one thing. And that's like made a whole career for them. And they never really stop working because it's a sound that is unique and that nobody else can do. And that, I'm like kind of, my own sound is kind of nondescript. So, and I enjoy doing as many different things as possible, but that, and you're always, you give yourself a better chance to get a job or whatever, at least, yeah. And still, but it used to be maybe even more so if you could do lots, different things, whether it's different accents or just different characters or sounds or noises. Sometimes, you get hired to not even speak. You're just making like animal sounds or something, or creature sounds. And there are guys who really do a lot of that, like D. Bradley Baker is one who I know does tons of, like non-speaking voiceover stuff.
Like Perry the Platypus, for example, from Phineas and Ferb, just for any of the listeners who don't know.
Yeah.
Because I know that Perry doesn't really talk, but, of course, he has that little
Yeah.
thing that he does with his teeth.
Right. Yeah, no, and D had all kinds of weird little techniques, and sometimes he would use like a toilet paper tube, to kind of augment and do interesting. He was, he came up with all kinds of.
Yeah, he's really good at he's really good at coming up with ways for sound effects. Like he's a genius at that.
Yeah. One of the characters that I remember from the Felix the Cat was the character of the Bermuda Triangle. And basically, the Bermuda Triangle was literally like this giant triangle floating in the ocean. And one day he decides he wants to get up and get out and go to New York or something. And at the end, I think he does say a few things, but mostly he's not talking. He's just making these sounds. And he's got this huge nose and like this beanie with a propeller. And he just looks like an idiot. And that's what he sounds like. He makes it to Manhattan and he's just like walking around. And he just makes dumb sounds like, and so it's fun to do stuff like that.
I can imagine, yeah.
And anytime like Felix the Cat or Billy and Mandy, it was very, it was a lot of fun to do different weird things.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in the intro that you also did a lot of work with DC, like in Batman stuff. And that kind of makes me wonder if you got to know Kevin Conroy at all, who just passed away a couple months ago.
Well, the main Batman stuff that I have done has been the video games, the Arkham Origins, and as Captain/Commissioner James Gordon, and maybe some other stuff, which I may or may not be allowed to talk about, and which I actually don't even know about. But I did do a couple of like the, what was it? The animated stuff. So I got to work with Kevin, a couple times. And there were a couple of like DVD, like separate things, like Batman, Superman, Public Enemies was one. All-Star Superman was another one. In the Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, I played Hawkman. So there were just a couple of times, and the animated series, I'm forgetting which one it was.
Justice
It
League.
was. That's right. See, yeah, Justice League.
One of my friends was on that show, and she was a guest on this podcast. So
Who was that?
I don't know if you'd know her, but her name is Serena Berman.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, no, I don't.
Okay, I actually was just talking to her the other day. I had a really good laugh with her about
Cool.
an old movie from the 90s.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't know Kevin, and I just got to work with him, a couple, 2 or 3 times. And, may he rest in peace. Sadly, he's not with us anymore, but he was,
Yeah.
it was pretty amazing. And I didn't even know, I went back and watched some of his on-camera stuff after he had passed away, which I didn't know about. And he was, yeah, I know, it was really cool. So, yeah, I wish I could have gotten to spend more time with him or whatever, but yeah.
He will I mean, he will forever be the Batman that everyone remembers.
Yeah, and he was just it was just so cool, and there was just like an effortless authority to the way he sounded and the way he, performed Batman. And it just, at least, to my ear, it never felt like, sometimes you can just feel like when someone's kind of, amped up, and somehow with him, even if he was like intense and amped up, it felt like kind of weirdly organic, and almost, it was like a calm kind of rage, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to wrap it up, let's talk about Shrek. Of course, as I said in the intro, you substituted for Shrek in video games and various stuff. How did you get that job?
So I was working on a video game that had something to do with the whole Shrek universe, but I wasn't, doing Shrek. I was doing some little incidental characters. I don't remember what they were. And during a break, I remember I was just sort of reading the script that was in front of me, and there were some lines from Shrek, and I was just reading the Shrek lines. And somebody, like in the engineering room, heard it and said, "Hey, you know what? Just keep reading some of those lines. We're gonna roll on some of that. Just it sounds interesting. So just in case." So I just read some of those Shrek lines, and then that was it. Never really heard anything else about it. I happened to be I don't know when, sometime later, I was talking to my friend who wrote that first play that I wrote, or that I acted in college. And after Santa Barbara, she had gone to film school in LA. And that was she wanted to, be a writer director. And somebody that she met in film school, I got to know him a little bit. Sometimes we would get together there was like a fourth person. We would meet semi-regularly at this restaurant and just try to write some stuff for no purpose really, except what can we come up with? So I knew this guy a little bit through her. So here it is, some years later, I'm talking to her on the phone, and she said that this guy, his name was David, had gotten a job at the newly formed animation department at DreamWorks. It was like DreamWorks was still kind of a fledgling studio. It was kind of a new thing, and this was their first, forming some kind of an animation division.
And now DreamWorks is popularly known mostly as an animation studio.
Yeah, right. But he had been working on, and this was right around the time. This was right after Shrek, Shrek 1. And I thought, oh wow, cool. And she happened to mention that, and he had been passing through. She was still living in Santa Barbara at the time. He had been passing through. They got together for dinner. One of the things he mentioned, just casually, was that they were looking for like a backup voice for Mike Myers for Shrek for some stuff that they needed to do. And she mentioned that to me on the phone. She said, oh, I had dinner with Dave the other night, and I said, oh, that's cool. I worked on this video game a little while back that was Shrek related, and I remember I was reading some Shrek lines, and one of the people in the booth, or the engineer, thought it sounded interesting, so they said, here, let's record some of those just for fun. And I mentioned that to her. So she said, well, I'll tell David that you did that. And he knew me, but I hadn't seen him for a while. And so it basically ended up, and she said, yeah, he'd like to talk to you. So I talked to David and did a little Shrek audition on the phone with him. And then, just gave me some lines. And started trying to talk like, Donkey, where are you, Donkey? And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I get this, I guess they contacted my agent and they said, hey, they want to fly you up to San Francisco, which is where the DreamWorks headquarters was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's where it started. Now it's in LA. Okay. But so they flew me up to San Francisco to record a bunch of commercials. There was McDonald's, and not Pepsi, but like Sierra Mist, the soft drink. There were like 4 or 5 different commercials. And there was a commercial for something in Australia. All of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, okay. Then, and these things were airing for a while, kind of a lot. So it suddenly became like this gig. And then Shrek 2 came along, and there were other things to do, some other commercials, and whatever Mike Myers either wasn't available to do or didn't want to do or wanted too much money to do, I'm not sure. And then there was also, sound alike for Donkey. There were like 2 or 3 different guys over time that I had worked with who did Donkey. And there were, sound alikes for the other characters, Puss in Boots, and and some of the stuff like for Shrek 2, there was a whole, on the DVD release of Shrek 2, there was a whole American Idol.
Far, Far Away Idol.
I was actually about to ask you about that, because I have the Shrek 2 VHS tape that has that at the end of it, and it's just so funny. Yeah,
that's me and the Far, Far Away Idol thing, and doing the Shrek singing too. And they also released a CD with some Shrek singing. And
for Shrek 2, I think we actually have that album.
Yeah, it was called. I've got it somewhere. I forget. Yeah, I think it came out after Shrek 2, but it's like, Shrek doing that song. What I like about you, you really know how to dance.
Keep on whispering in my ear.
Yeah, whispering in my ear. Tell me all the things
that I want to hear, because it's true.
Yeah, that's what I like about you.
Love that song.
So, and then there were kind of like live things or theme park things that used Shrek. So, lately there hasn't been much, so I don't know if I don't know.
But with Far Away Idol,
I know that you had mentioned that you usually record separately, so I'm just going to assume that you didn't get to actually work with Simon Cowell.
No.
But I do actually want to ask you about doing the voice of Shrek. Have you ever met Mike Myers?
No.
Okay,
No.
believe it or not, I have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course you have. You're Canadian.
Well, basically, I had heard on the radio. I was out with my dad, and I had heard on the radio that
Right.
what was that?
And right there, we said I was out. The Canadian just came bursting forth. Sorry to interrupt.
It's all good. It's all good. But anyway, I was out with my dad, and I heard on the radio that Mike Myers was coming to Halifax, and I thought it was on a comedy tour. I was like, oh, well, that'll be interesting. Too bad I didn't know about it. I could have gotten tickets. And then I thought maybe is it sold out or something? So I went. I'm at school. I'm in class, and I pulled my phone out, and I was like, Mike Myers, Halifax, and I saw that it wasn't a stand-up show. He actually had released a book about Canada and was touring Canada to promote it and was showing up at places to sign it.
Cool.
So as luck would have it, I had a free period during like that was my last class the day that Mike was in town. And so my mom and I actually went to Costco. We were like among the first 4 people in line for Mike Myers, waited 4 hours because we knew it was going to be crowded by the time that he actually showed up. And there's Mike Myers right in front of me. And he signed you basically have to buy the book to go to the signing. But I was just like, I'm going to be meeting Mike Myers. I don't really care. So I went up to him because I really like him. I said, hi, I'm James. And he said, hi, James. And he shook my hand. I actually have a picture of all you listeners that are watching this on YouTube are seeing a photo of Mike and I looking at the camera, but I've got a picture somewhere of us shaking hands that I'll have to dig out. But that's
awesome.
That's my Mike Myers experience.
Yeah. No, I never did meet him. And you just remind me of something that I have actually like totally kind of forgot about.
Okay.
Back when I was also the other alternate voice of Roger Rabbit. And they brought me into like the recording studio once when the original guy, Charles Fleischer, was doing a session. And I felt kind of weird about it. And they like kept me in the, in the engineering room. Said, okay, and it was weird. It was unnecessary, really. But the guy said, we want you to watch him and see what he does. So I felt kind of like awkward about it. So, but we won't let him see you. So I'm kind of hiding in the back. So I never met. Actually, I have met Charles Fleischer years and years later. I see him at the market sometimes.
Oh, that's funny.
And at Whole Foods, that's where I see him. Mm-hmm. And one time he happened, and I recognize him. I never told him, hey, I was the other voice of Roger Rabbit. But I did say, oh, hi, Charles, I'm a fan, I'm a big fan. And he was nice. And I remember once he told me the best technique for telling if an apple is ripe or not. He said, most people, they grab the apple and they'll push it in to see if it is kind of crunchy. Don't push it. You rub it. If it squeaks, then it's good. Don't push it in. Don't make a dent. Rub it.
Although I feel like if it was dented, if it was at the supermarket, then it would be a little bit off. Like, you know what I mean? Like dented cans are 25% off.
Yeah. I mean, if it's soft and mushy, then it'll push in easily. If it's crisp, then it's hard to push in, and you can maybe tell without making a dent. But the squeaking technique works. You can. Okay, that's good. And I kind of forgot. I forgot all about.
I'll remember that next time I go to the grocery store.
Yeah, no, you just kind of rub it with you can be a finger or whatever. You just sort of gently, and you can tell, it'll squeak if it's. if it's crispy.
Well, that's all I've got here. Is there anything you want to say to finish up?
Wow. Well, yeah, boy, I guess not. I can't think of anything. I don't really have anything to plug at the moment, except if people feel like going to check out this movie that my on-camera debut as the lead character in this silly movie, which is
That
either.
involves killing Harold.
Let me, you know what? While you can talk or something, let me just look it up and make sure I know what the title is.
Okay.
Well,
Let me see if I can look it up.
yeah, the director's name is Jim Skidmore. I'm not even sure I came across it. Did I send myself a link?
Skidmore.
But so far, neither of those titles have led me. Let's see. I think I emailed myself the link.
I got it. I found it.
Yeah?
All right.
What is
The name of the movie that, for all you listeners out there who are interested, the name of the movie that Michael has been plugging as his film debut is called Let's All Kill Harold.
I'll Kill Harold. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you can find that, be sure to check it out. And Michael, thank you very much for joining me for Nostalgia Talk today.
Thanks, James. Pleasure. I hope I didn't ramble on too much here and there, but it was fun.
Hey, I mean, it makes it very interesting. It's Nostalgia Talk, so it's all these nostalgic stories for everyone to share, and definitely for me to enjoy as well.
Cool. I like to talk, so it works out.
Absolutely. And to all you listeners, you guys know that there's lots of stuff coming up. And actually, I'm gearing up to announce some stuff right now. Got a couple of stuff being prepared very, very soon. So yeah, there's lots of stuff coming, and I'll see you then. Earlier I was doing the Star Trek sign. This usually would be the time where I say peace out, but I'm doing the Star Trek sign. Live long and prosper.
Hey, live long and prosper, and peace out. And if you feel like it, whenever this is up and running, send me a link or whatever to the.
Absolutely.
That'd be cool. So, yeah, thanks, James. Good luck with everything.